I'm Nate, aka B-Tier Mutineer, and in today's video I want to talk about why I'm personally worried about the rumored Oblivion remake that I've been hearing about so much on the internet for the past months, and which is apparently shadow dropping anytime now. Anytime now. Surely it's happening, right? First of all, I want to give you a bit of context on me as a player of Elder Scrolls games. Oblivion is my favorite out of the series, with Morrowind a close second. I've mentioned in my top RPGs of all time video why I like Oblivion so much. The main reason is that it has really good writing for its quests and NPCs, and it also just has a fun, whimsical look and feel to it. Really love the UI too. So as someone who loves Oblivion, I would be ecstatic to see a remastered version of it with a few adjustments here and there to make the game feel a bit better. I'm not talking about adjustments for the modern gamer, but stuff that would have been better even back then, such as adjusting the balance of level scaling, more impact effects for melee combat, enemy AI to be a bit more responsive, and so on. Before we get into the meat of things, I want to take a moment to say a special thank you to my members who help keep this channel running. I'd really appreciate it if you'd consider joining the channel as a member to support me and unlock perks like early access to videos. Joining is very much appreciated, but not required. I am always thankful, even if you just take the time to like the video and maybe leave a comment. Back to Oblivion. The thing is that I find Oblivion to be a really solid game with very nice exploration, visuals, and of course the whimsical high fantasy visuals, which were a big departure from Morrowind, but still worked well to give Oblivion its own signature style. I wouldn't want the game to be remade, only remastered, because a full-on remake would ruin the game's charm. And here's where we reach a point where some people will use one word, other will use the other word, and we'll end up confused. I consider a remaster to be 90 to 95% exactly like the original game in terms of systems and gameplay, while having its visuals upgraded. That 5 to 10% of changes would come from bug fixes and maybe a few quality of life or balancing adjustments, but the game experience would otherwise be untouched. Diablo 2 Resurrected is a great example of this, and it's a remaster I deeply love since it lets me enjoy D2 without the issues related to running such an old game on new systems. What I think of when I hear remake is a far more involved process. Someone making a modern adaptation of the original, keeping some things the same but changing a lot to reimagine the game from a new perspective. And frankly, I wouldn't want a reimagining of Oblivion. At least, not from anyone other than the Sky Oblivion team, who are extremely passionate fans and understand what is unique and lovable about Oblivion. Otherwise, the most successful remakes I've seen by actual developers have been more what I consider to be remasters, since there was barely anything changed from the original game in terms of how it plays like. So I hope that you can see that when I hear Oblivion Remake, I'm kind of hearing something that sounds like everything that made the original game interesting and fun and unique is going to be sanded down into making something like Skyrim 2, or in other words, a far more generic feeling RPG. And let me tell you, most Oblivion fans do not want that. This is the first and main reason I'm concerned about the remake, because Oblivion is such a beloved game that's still having content made to this day with challenge videos and rankings and all sorts of things. If you take away too many of its little quirks and edges, it's just not going to be Oblivion anymore. But before we move on to my second reason, I will say that it's entirely possible that the developers or publishers of this new version of Oblivion are just using the word remake because the game is being developed in a new engine and thus literally remade or recreated in that engine. It doesn't necessarily mean they will change a lot of things about how the game plays, just that it's a literal interpretation of the word. For example, Until Dawn got a remake in Unreal Engine that was literally just a remastered version with extremely few things changed from the original. I personally would bet on this being the definition that they're using for remake, and I'd be very happy if that's the case, since that would mean we're getting a nice Oblivion remaster, the only thing making it a remake being that it's developed in a different engine. The other big reason why I'm concerned is the utter silence that we've had from both Bethesda or Microsoft and Virtuos. So far, this rumor, this leak has been circulating for so long that at this point you'd think someone who's working on the game would come out and say, yes, it's an active development, but no, we can't share any details at this time. But the fact that they haven't said anything isn't really giving me the confidence to say what other people have been saying and assume they're just going to shadow drop it as some kind of marketing strategy due to Oblivion already being very popular. No, I'm not seeing it that way, even though a lot of people have mentioned this as a thing and mentioned how excited they are at the prospect of the Oblivion remake being shadow dropped in the next months or the next weeks or whatever. Could be literally any day now, maybe even on the day I post this video. Yeah, no, I don't think so. For me, the most obvious reason why the people involved in making and publishing the game haven't said anything is because they aren't confident in the quality of the game. Either they're not really confident it's going to sell well or be well received by players at all, and they're kind of cutting their losses at this point by deciding to shadow drop it without doing marketing to recoup some costs, or the game is at this time in a far worse or unfinished state than they expected when they initially projected the game's release. Maybe the devs ran into some issues of how Oblivion systems work in UE5, maybe they just have too many bugs or performance issues, the bottom line being that they very likely had to delay the project to fix whatever's wrong, and so because the game isn't releasing this year, that's why they're not saying anything about it just yet. Personally, to me, the silence stinks far more of the first possibility, that they think the game is bad, it's not going to sell well, and is thus not worth the marketing budget. It's already written off as a loss, or at most something that could maybe recoup its cost. The reason why I'm saying this is because historically, Bethesda has been extremely diligent in marketing their games and their IP. Even if this is a game developed by Virtuos, it's still Bethesda's IP, and they'd still make a decent amount of money if the game sells well. Skyrim was marketed to hell and back. I saw TV adverts, billboards, ads in game stores, and so on. Same with Starfield. They were screaming off the top of the mountain that it's the best space RPG, the most complex thing ever, so many planets, wow. And you know what? Despite the mixed player and critical reviews, the game still sold super well. Hell, Bethesda is still mentioning the Elder Scrolls VI from time to time just to keep the interest up and get more and more people to talk about it. So I really don't see any reason why they wouldn't want to talk about the Oblivion Remake, unless they think it's going to be received negatively and they don't want to draw extra ire upon themselves, especially after Starfield's issues. So I just don't think the people involved in this Oblivion Remake, if it is indeed real, are confident in the quality of their game. And just to give an example of a recent game that didn't have much marketing because it ended up being quite a poor quality game, need I mention Veilguard. People knew for the entire time that BioWare was working on the next Dragon Age title, but there was extremely little information that BioWare shared about the project and how it was doing. Until the last few weeks before release, they didn't show off any gameplay. There was that leaked gameplay footage from an early alpha test, which had many fans upset about what the game would play like. And guess what? BioWare or EA didn't say anything in response to that leak because they realized far too late that the combat system they had was not what Dragon Age players wanted, and wouldn't have been able to fix it in the time they had left. I obviously can't speculate what happened with Veilguard and its marketing, but I imagine that they realized it wasn't really going to do that well, and it did even worse than they predicted. So, I just don't consider it to be a good sign that despite the buzz on the internet about these rumors, the actual devs and publishers have stayed completely silent. We can hope all we want that it's just a matter of the game being delayed, and the reason they don't want to talk about it is that they want to have gameplay to show off and early but stable builds to give to journalists and reviewers, but I don't know. I'm not confident at all that the silence is coming from a mere delay. Finally, the only other concern I have is that it very simply doesn't exist at all. Maybe the reason why Bethesda or Microsoft or Virtuos haven't said anything in response to these rumors is that the project at some point got cancelled. Since that early leak, any number of things could have happened that would cause it to be cancelled, and if it did get cancelled, we may not even ever get confirmation that the game was ever in the works and got cancelled. So this might forever live on as a rumor and a potential thing to happen in the future, like, oh, maybe we're gonna get it this year or next year, and it's just never coming. I would like to think that someone would come out and say a definite no if the project isn't being planned on being released at any point in the future, but I'm not sure. I really wanted to make this video to talk about these possibilities because I've seen a lot of articles and videos that are kind of just assuming that it's 100% a thing that's happening and also that it's going to be very good. And, I have nothing against wanting to stay optimistic and hopeful towards something, especially when it comes to an IP or game you love, but at the same time, I have learned that it's best to keep my hopes and expectations more realistic and even a little bit pessimistic. I had super high hopes for Veilguard, as Dragon Age is my favorite setting, with Origins being my all-time favorite game, and Dragon Age in general having some of my favorite characters and stories out of all games. And I tried to stay positive even after I saw the leaked alpha gameplay that looked nothing like I wanted out of Dragon Age, even after I heard about the game's troubled development because I thought, if anyone can do it, it's BioWare, even after I saw the terrible cinematic trailer and still quite bad gameplay footage and then the early previews and reviews. I knew that the lead Dragon Age writer, David Gator, was no longer working at BioWare since 2017 or so, but I wanted to stay positive because I loved the series too much to believe that it could turn bad, that this game could be the shameful and disappointing end to my favorite series. So I learned the hard way that this realistic or skeptical view towards upcoming games is far better, especially when it comes to leaks and rumors things that aren't confirmed, people are going to be a lot more sensationalist about it. So I wanted my video to be more toned down. Maybe it'll be a bit of a party pooper, sorry. And in case the game ends up being real and also very good, I'll be glad to eat my words. But I do think we need to have nuanced conversations exploring both the positives and negatives of games, but doing so respectfully, explaining what we like and don't like about them so that our opinions are out there. Maybe devs will take notice of our opinions and change games for the better in the future, maybe not. Even so, I think the communities for each game and game series would benefit a lot from having these types of discussions. So these have been my personal reasons for being concerned about the rumored Oblivion remake. I'd love to know your own thoughts about it down below. Keep it nice and respectful, please. Do you think the Oblivion remake is real? If it is, would you want to play it? And do you think it's going to be good? In any case, if you're looking forward to more videos about games I like, do remember to subscribe, and leave a like and comment while you're at it too. They really help. This has been B Tier Mutineer. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.